Hello, guys, and welcome to FIAT LUX. Today on the show, we have Bitkarrot, who is a Lightning enthusiast and developer, and also a co host on the Nostrovia podcast. Welcome, Bitkarrot.
Hi there. How's it going?
It's going good. I'm excited to talk about Lightning, some of its use cases, just get to understand it a little bit better, because I have to admit, I am quite new to Lightning. I haven't used it that many times. I don't quite understand all the intricacies of the network. Well, let's jump into it. Start with something basic. So, what is Lightning?
So, Lightning is Bitcoin's layer two. It is basically rapid payments over the internet, and it's constructed using peer to peer channels.
Okay. And so, what does that mean? What's a layer two, and what do you mean by peer to peer?
So, I'm assuming you're familiar with how Bitcoin basically works.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
Okay. Okay. So, there what happens, the basic idea is that you would have someone running a Bitcoin node with a Lightning node on top, and they would open a channel to someone else who they wanted to conduct with business with on Lightning Network. And the channel would be funded with a Bitcoin multi-sig transaction. And for example, if I wanted to open a channel to you to do business with you, I would fund that, and it could be dual funded, or let's say in this case, make it one side, where you put Bitcoin into that multi-sig and open a channel that can actually process Lightning transactions. And so, like, the entire network is based on like these peer-to-peer channels that are all interconnected, and process transactions faster on than on layer one.
Okay, and so how does that work then? How are the transactions processed faster by using these channels? Like what's a channel?
The channel is like a multi-sig transaction between two parties where you've locked some Bitcoin and you've processed payments between two parties. So if I'm running a node and you're running a node, we can agree that this channel has like a certain capacity in terms of Bitcoin, and we can move payments back and forth between the two of us. So because it's like you to me directly, and it doesn't go onto the Bitcoin blockchain, it's faster because like Bitcoin has blocks that are like validated every 10 minutes, and that's a bit slower. And you also have transaction fees on there, which are likely to be higher. And that's the general gist of it.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Is it? Do you say in some ways a bit like an escrow, that kind of idea? When you're saying
Yeah,
you open up like a channel between the two parties.
yeah. So it's
Okay,
like
okay, that's cool.
two people doing business with each other. That's the way I think of it. I'm not really like a theoretical person. I like real world use cases. So I think of all these things in terms of, how do you do business with somebody across the world, but how do you do it faster without an intermediary? And that's one way to do it. But, the Lightning Network also needs like other people to route payments through. So for example, let's say I'm here, on in the US and you are over in Europe. And then there's a way to get there. Maybe someone else has another Lightning node in between that can route payments. So that's how the network is sort of set up.
Okay, okay. That makes sense. So Lightning is obviously faster, so it's better for sort of like um, instant transactions, basically, like for like basic commerce. So if you the classic example, right, like the Bitcoin cafe kind of thing. You want to pay for a coffee, or I guess you wanna know that you've received the money. When you've given up the goods, you want that to be instant, right? You don't want someone to walk away and then have to wait for it to settle. Um, so you want to know that money's in your account as soon as the person's taken received the goods from you. So
Yeah.
that makes sense for the sort of like business case. Um, So what kind of have you seen any like interesting uses in business, or like do you have any good examples of where lightning, apart from like the one I just mentioned, do you have any like examples of where lightning is used these days, and how businesses benefit from that?
Sure. Uh, there are a lot of them. They're growing. The network is growing as well. There are circular economies. For example, in South Africa, there's Bitcoin EKZ, which is effectively allowing people in their organizations to earn money through Lightning, and then they can also pay for goods and services using Lightning. And one of the biggest adopters of it is the Pick and Pay shopping. It's like a big grocery store, basically, and people can now go there and spend their Lightning to buy anything in the grocery store. So I think in terms of like generally, you know, as a cryptocurrency internationally, Bitcoin's the most visible name. It's the widest. People are most aware of it, and Lightning provides the faster settlement for smaller payments. So, if you want to do something that's a micro payment or something that's very small in terms of value, Lightning is a very effective way of doing it because you can do like maybe 100 sats. You could do 1 sat. You could do like $5 worth of Lightning, and you can send it anywhere in the world. And that's fantastic because of the fact that I can't think of how to do that with wire transfers internationally. Like, let's say I'm here in the United States and I want to send a transaction to South Africa, or if I want to send a transaction to, say, Vietnam, for someone to do some sort of artwork on Fiverr. Right now, you would actually have to have a bank account, and they would have to be hooked up or through some other payment provider like PayPal for a very small transaction. And let's say it's like a $5 job or a $10 job. And it's, cost prohibitive because they have to actually have the cost of setting up an account, and not necessarily everyone in developing countries have a bank account. So like, with Lightning, anyone can open up their own wallet, and they can easily do this on a mobile phone, and or on their desktop app, and receive payments instantaneously with no KYC, with no hassle, no paperwork that would be normally involved in a bank, getting a bank account or being set up with a payment provider like PayPal or Venmo. And the transaction cost drops to almost nothing comparatively, and the settlement's instantaneous. So, I mean, there are different types of Lightning wallets out there. There's like custodial, and there's non-custodial, and there's, running a node. I think running a node is still fairly technical for most people at this point, but it's getting easier and easier. Like every year that people work on Lightning, things are getting more usable and they're getting easier to use. So, like, in terms of microeconomies having the potential to change globally and to impact macro, I think eventually that's going to be the story that's going forward in the next couple of years to decade, especially for people who don't have banking.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think in the last episode, or at least not the last episode, in episode 4, where I talked with G Sovereignty, and we were talking about Noster, and one of the use cases that came up, you just mentioned, like these really sort of low barrier payments, right? Like you can send 1 sat, and so it enables things like zapping or boosting or tipping or whatever you want to call it. And I think that's like a really cool side of it as well. So like moving forward for not only for like these microtransactions for people that just want to do small, like gig economy type stuff, whether that's, in the West or, other parts of the world, where actually it's probably more helpful for them to have something like that. I think it'd be really useful for, content creators, people who write blogs, people who, do things on social media, et cetera, et cetera. So that's pretty cool. I actually installed quite recently the Wallet of Satoshi. and I was quite impressed at how simple that wallet is, and how simple the Lightning experience was. And also quite it was quite like clear how to use it, and I don't know, it was just like a really good user experience for my first time. Like I was quite impressed by it. And granted, the wallet of Satoshi is sort of advertised as the simplest Lightning wallet, so it is going to be quite simple and easy to use. But even putting that aside, I thought it was I was really quite impressed. Just using Lightning, and the user experience with, at least with that particular wallet. But then also looking at some of the other ways that people are using Lightning, and just how sort of easy it is to interact with the network, and how many options are available to you. So yeah, I want to. The next question that I want to ask is like, so we're talking about sort of the benefits of the Lightning Network, and obviously if you explain like the sort of the business use case, and how it can assist businesses and people to receive money for work that they're doing, and there's a sort of like barrier to entry. They don't need like a bank account. The processing, the fees are low, etc., etc. What are some of the issues, if there are any? I'm assuming there are, as there are with any kind of technology. What are some of the issues that you think Lightning has?
I think it's still pretty much at the stage of where it's a developing network. And, like 5 years ago, like 2018, it was really scrappy. And people were saying it was reckless because you could easily lose your funds. That's the stage of where it was. And I think like in 2021, there were more people who were onboarded into Lightning. For example, there was a giant explosion of people who started running their own Lightning nodes, which helped make the network a bit more decentralized. And there are people who are Lightning enthusiasts who want to learn about the technology. And then now in 2023, the capacity of the network has expanded about 5 times compared to where it was in 2021. So we see this uptrend in growth before payments like might get lost. It couldn't get routed. You couldn't find a path because the network was really well developed. And so like with any peer-to-peer network, it's kind of difficult to start. You kind of like to start a peer-to-peer network. It's like, okay, well, who am I going to connect with if I'm going to actually start running a node and trying to process payments? It's like the chicken and egg problem. So that, I think it's matured a bit. And then there are also like people are concerned about custodial and risk, and then non-custodial nodes. It's still difficult to run a non-custodial node, like where you're self-sovereign effectively. A lot of the wallets out there, which are really good, and there's been a great growth, they're all custodial. So like Wallet Satoshi is, it's a custodial wallet. But at the same time, I think it's really important for users to be onboarded with something that's easy to use, even if it is custodial. So, that is one concern that a lot of people have had. But, moving forward, there are other wallets which are non-custodial, and we're heading that direction. It's not going to be immediate, but to get people to start to learn how to use it and start accepting it and also transacting is the first step in the right direction. And I think Nostr, which was effectively birthed out of a bunch of Bitcoin and Lightning developers who started it, is one of the biggest online use cases for Lightning right now. I think last I checked, there was about like 100,000 Lightning addresses on Nostr. And, we're approaching about 1 to 2 million actual users on the network. So for something that started like only in 2020, that's a huge explosion. And in part, it's because the protocols are simple for people to adopt and simple for people to actually build on as side projects, not even full-time necessarily. And, it's brought in quite a number of people just this year who have never even heard of Lightning, who never used Bitcoin. And they're like, oh, this is interesting. This is a new social decentralized network. And how does this work? And that in itself is driving adoption and driving more people to come into the space and improve user experience for other wallets. And also, hopefully, it will attract more developers who can help with some of the privacy issues that have been talked about. Because, I mean, Lightning is not entirely private. There's, decent sender privacy, but receiving privacy is not as great. So there's been more innovations on that side, and there's been more innovations on, for example, like being able to send payments to a Lightning address or an LN URL without having to have a server. So people are trying to decouple and eliminate a lot of the centralization risks, for example, of running a server, because not every single user is going to run a server. And I think the good part is that there's more innovation because there's, more people who are coming on board, not just using the network, but attracting more people to actually work on it. So it's still early stages, but I think within the next 2 or 3 years, we'll see it start to mature and become more widely accepted and used. But still very early.
Yeah, you mentioned, the sort of, you mentioned some of the things that Lightning came up against early on. And that kind of reminded me, you were talking about like the peer-to-peer nature of it. And you were saying, this is the kind of thing you expect from peer-to-peer. And I think maybe for people that like aren't familiar with Lightning, maybe or even cryptocurrency, but are familiar with like peer-to-peer protocols, things like BitTorrent. I
Yeah.
would imagine what you were saying is very similar to like seeds and peers. So like when there's not enough peers, that's kind of the problem you were saying Lightning was running up against early on. There wasn't enough peers to be able to download the files.
Yeah, it's similar, but it's a little different. I'm sure you discussed Scuttlebutt with G and maybe Hypercore, which is sort of like a BitTorrent protocol. Yeah, it's it takes time for something to grow, and a lot of people have always asked, why is it taking so long for Lightning? Lightning's never going to take off. But like any peer-to-peer protocol where you have these discovery problems and the challenge of getting more people onto the network is the hardest. But once you've reached like a critical mass, then it starts to take off. And I think that's one of the beauties of Nostr is because the fact that a lot of the developers originally said, okay, well, we have a problem with social media is obviously too centralized, like Twitter and Facebook. But at the same time, like, how can we engineer this better? And the beauty of Nostr is that, first of all, it's a simple protocol. And it is basically just dumb relays, smart clients, and the user keeps the keys, which is a complete inversion of the model of most social media and big tech. But in addition to that, one of the biggest things about Nostr is that I see a lot of developers coming in who actually just work on side projects. And these side projects actually have impact. So it's like there's very little in terms of overhead in trying to create something that people will use and they're useful. Like a blogging platform or a blogging client on Nostr is one of the first things I had in mind as a low-hanging fruit and quick to develop, but also drives adoption. And this is really significant because then people will be also introduced to the Lightning Network in a way because they see other people using it. But at the same time, it's like beating all these other protocols that people have been working on for years for decentralizing social media that have had lots of venture capital thrown at them. For example, Jack Dorsey's Blue Sky is like a decentralized version of Twitter, but have yet to really truly materialize. Like if you go to Blue Sky, it says, okay, you can sign up for the beta. but I still haven't been able to try the beta out. And yet Noster, everyone's on it all the time because it's open. So it's really nice to have the open source development just explode because it's open, and you don't have only a few engineers working on something and nobody else is using it.
Unchecked governments have eradicated privacy and truth. Those who resist are brought down swiftly, but we refuse to submit. Lunapunks are freedom fighters, protected by encrypted shadows. The future we're building is sovereign and uncensorable. The moonlit night is coming.
LunarDAO is an investment fund based on Lunapunk philosophy. Sovereign individuals assemble squad wealth to leverage collective strength, become investors, and allocate funds into privacy projects and anonymity tooling, building a portfolio of supported privacy assets. By this, LunarDAO supports the developing teams, expands freedom and crypto sovereignty, and captures value in the upcoming privacy cycle. Any member can exit the squad at any time. Members are anonymous, hence can build Lunapunk vision without fear of frozen funds, legal implications, or any kind of repression. LunarDAO aims to move to a full Anon setup and expand the Lunapunk forest of encryption, a sanctuary where society can redefine itself, self-administrate and regain its economic, political, and moral agency. LunarDAO also supports research on privacy technologies, listed in the wiki at wiki.lunardao.net, and educational structures such as Adalin Academy at adalinacademy.org, where people can acquire knowledge and master skills in programming and economy while developing a philosophical frame to generate the future path of the Lunapunk ecosystem. The launch is coming soon. Stay tuned and follow Lunapunk Squad on Twitter. Okay, so to go back a little bit, you were saying about the people was kind of wanting Lightning development to maybe speed up a little bit, and I think something I've heard about Lightning and obviously Bitcoin as well is that there is a culture of kind of conservatism. Sorry, and so like the development sometimes is slow, but that's for good reason. Like Bitcoin and the Lightning people, like the community is very kind of not quite, some people say resistant to change and that it's a bad thing, but then I think from the perspective of those communities, they see it as conservative and they see it as trying to retain an element of security. Essentially, they're trying to stop it from making some changes that might cause some bigger issues further on down the line. They want to make sure everything's solid before it's implemented. So yeah, I think maybe that kind of makes sense. That I guess that the development was somewhat slow. And to go back as well, while we're talking about speed of things, you mentioned that you think it's important to have like a good user experience for the average person. And I think there's always like a balance, at least in crypto, or in crypto especially, between wanting this like nice, clean, simple user experience and onboarding as many people as we can and scaling the networks. It's also balancing that with the principles and the values of cryptocurrency, and because what do we lose? The idea is kind of what do we lose by making it easy for people to use? Typically, with certain elements of things, it means more centralization. It means custodial things, and that kind of gets further away from the ideal. So people are always kind of like hesitant to go with these easy options. But I think obviously what we need to do is strike the balance between easy user experience, easy onboarding, but also secure, private, funds are safe, no one controls them but you've got to find that balance. So I guess the next thing, you mentioned a little bit, you touched on privacy. What kind of, if any, does like privacy does Lightning afford you? And is there a way to add privacy to Lightning through using something else? Or do you use, for these kind of things at the moment, do you have to use alternatives? Are there any alternatives that are, I guess, privacy enhancing, or even just an alternative to Lightning? Are there any alternatives to Lightning?
What do you mean by alternatives to Lightning? Do you mean like on Bitcoin, or you mean? Can you clarify that?
Yeah. So what would be like the next best layer two on Bitcoin? If let's say Lightning didn't exist, what would you use instead? Are you aware of any other things that kind of get close to it, or like, yeah, what other alternatives are there?
So, like, I have stopped looking outside of the Bitcoin ecosystem for a while because this is so encompassing. Like, I used to look at other things like Ethereum, but I don't really anymore. There are projects on top of Lightning that are constantly working on improving privacy. That's the first thing I say. I'm not deep into them, but I do know there are projects such as Fedimint, and also I think Cashew does it helps with privacy. And there's innovations where people can use to enhance their privacy on top of Lightning for sure. That being said, like surely you could use some altcoin if you really wanted to for, like Monero. But I think the fundamental problem with that is also who's going to adopt it, because not necessarily everyone recognizes it globally, whereas everyone recognizes Bitcoin globally.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. I think, have you ever heard of Liquid? You know about Liquid?
Yeah, Lightning. No, sorry, not Lightning. The Blockstream Liquid. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Aren't they trying to do something with confidential transactions? I feel like, don't they have like an alternative that's kind of like Lightning? It's also a layer two on top of Bitcoin.
I am not sure about Liquid. The only thing I've heard with Liquid so far is that they've been trying people to use Tether, trying to get people to use Tether on top of Liquid. But I actually don't know anything with respect to Lightning on Liquid. I don't really follow that. Sorry.
Okay. No, that's fine. That's fine. Fair enough. Fair enough. No, I was just curious. I mean, I don't know of any myself. I just happen to have heard of Liquid. Obviously, I know Blockstream and Adam Back. They're quite like popular sort of entities and figures in the cryptocurrency world. But yeah, I'm personally, I'm only really aware of Lightning and Liquid. I don't know of that many other projects out there that are kind of trying to do the same thing. But admittedly, I'm quite new to Lightning. But yeah, so I think maybe the next question that I want to ask is, is there anything that like really excites you out there that you've seen on Lightning right now? Anything like cutting edge? Any experimentation that you think is interesting
Yeah.
and notable?
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, I so a lot of this is just having fun. Trying to see what works. Uh, but I really love the Ellen Bits project a lot. I contribute to them on occasion. And what that actually is really, you can think of it like a WordPress, but for Lightning. So, you're familiar with WordPress, yeah?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And so, you know how WordPress has a lot of plugins? Like you can plug in a shopping cart. Yeah. So effectively, Ellen Bits is like that. It's really powerful because you can run it on top of a Lightning node. And let's say your friends are brand new to Lightning, but you're like a Lightning expert. You can create a model where effectively, you can provide Lightning accounts for them on a node. So, and allow them to have access to different services. You can give them a Lightning address, which looks like an email address, but it's a receiving address for Lightning payments. You can run a little store. You can have like a shopping cart on top of Lightning with things you could sell, virtual or physical, like t-shirts, or if you want to sell mugs and stuff like that, you can run that on top of Lightning, accept Lightning payments. You can also accept Bitcoin payments because they've integrated both Bitcoin and Lightning payments in there. And then you can do things like streaming sats for podcasts. So you can accept, Lightning. If someone really loves your podcast and they want to send you money, they can send you, for example, like 10 sats a minute, while your podcast is being played or while they're listening to it. So it's really cool how many different use cases there are. And, people are writing new extensions every single day to help make it easier. In fact, there's one that just came out and I haven't played with it yet, but somebody in, I believe, El Salvador had created an extension to LN for Uber. So ride sharing. So people can basically use that app to pay for ride shares.
Okay, that's really cool. So just before we move on, how do you spell that? Was it ELEN? Ellen bits or Elan bits? ELAN.
LN. LN like lightning, like the letter L as in Larry and as in
Oh,
Nancy.
lightning.
And
LN.
Yeah.
Okay.
LN.
Yeah. Okay. LN bits. Cool.
Yeah, you can
Yeah,
go to
I'll have to put that in the description.
lnbits.com.
I'll definitely check that myself.
Yeah. I love the team too.
Okay.
That's the whole thing is about the space. The space I like about Lightning and Bitcoin development is, for the most part, everyone's very enthusiastic about what they're working on. So there's that, camaraderie, and it's really pleasant. And people do it because they really like doing it. I find that more so than, let's say you work at a company and you're being paid to do something and people are like, oh, okay, I'll just do it because. So, yeah.
Yeah, I know. I think that's the concept, the whole rideshare thing. I think it's really interesting to think about the kind of businesses that Lightning could bootstrap, because essentially, there are barriers to kind of starting, like a small enterprise, because you have to have a payment processor, you have to be verified, you have to have a business bank account, you have to do all the taxing and the accounting, you have to have a limited corporation, or you have to be a freelancer, or there's all these things that you have to do. Whereas it seems like, as you said before, right, Bitcoin has the reputation already, and so it's interesting to think that with Lightning, coupled with the reputation of Bitcoin, meaning people will actually accept it as a form of payment, because you could argue that, oh, well, you could do this ride share with Solana, or you could do the ride share with Polygon, or you could do some ETH layer 2 or whatever. But who's going to take that seriously? So the interesting thing with the Lightning thing is a lot of people have heard of Bitcoin, and so I could see how that would actually work, just based on the fact that it has this reputation. And so you can bootstrap all these smaller business projects, which I think is really interesting. So I guess thinking about that, it will be cool to see what comes in the future, and how that whole thing develops. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and then also because there's just no KYC. The barrier is super low. I'm sure you experienced how long it took you to set up your account on Nostr, and also to get a wallet Satoshi. It's just there. And you don't have to think too hard about it. And if you're concerned about, if it's custodio and you've worked up, a couple months worth of income, let's say running a small business, let's say you're a hairdresser, you offer to cut some people's hair for Lightning payments, for example, and you've, stashed a whole bunch of Lightning, you can swap it back on chain. There's many different services that allow you to do that. And there's some of them that are even built into LN bits. where, if you ran your own instance as a small business, everything that you do could be just on there, like accepting payments, and then swapping it back onto on-chain for safekeeping if you wanted to do that, or creating a paywall to content. Or if you ran it as a small organization, you could also do something like lightning prisms. I wrote about this like a week ago, in fact, about lightning prisms, which is an idea that came from Dergege and Mr. Cooks, who's one of the BTC Pay server developers. And the idea is like, if you have an organization, let's say fiatlux.org, and let's say you have co-hosts in your podcast, and maybe you have a producer or someone else that you're collaborating with. If someone pays into your organization at fiatlux.org, you could automatically split those payments by percentage to other co-hosts or maybe guests or whoever else you want to pay, and have it automated using Lightning. And that feature is now available on LN Bits. And the concept is, created, and I wrote a blog post about it too, on how you exactly would set it up. Because people are saying, oh, there's no real user interface. I'm like, how do you do this? The joy is sharing. I think part of the journey is the joy is sharing, like, the experience of how these things are done and how they're created. And it's just happening so quickly because there's so many different areas of innovation. Like, I can't even keep up. That's what's crazy. Like, between Lightning and Nostr, the innovation is just going at such a rapid rate. I haven't seen anything like this in a while, and it's just insane. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, no, I was, I've said previously that, that's one of the exciting things about open source as well. I think, like, if these things weren't open source, then the innovation and the development wouldn't be as fast as it is, because it wouldn't be as open and as accessible to all the developers and all the people that want to tinker with it and just experiment. So I think the split payments idea is really cool. And I think definitely something that's needed for, like, the Bitcoin community, especially because there's obviously been a lot of talk about NFTs over the last couple of years, and how artists can essentially get royalties and things like that. So it's nice to see that in some way, like, there's an option out there for Bitcoin.
Yeah, I see, like, there's cross innovation for sure. Like, Bitcoin ordinals is not something I really paid attention to much, but it sounds like it's like the Bitcoin's moment for NFTs, which were mostly on other projects before, like Ethereum. And yeah, I mean, I also see things like GetAlby. I don't know if you used GetAlby before, but GetAlby is a browser plugin for Lightning. It reminds me a little bit it reminds me a little bit of MetaMask for Ethereum, but I think it's better because effectively, like, you can hook up your own node. If you run your own node, you can connect it to GetAlby. It also provides a wallet for you if you're a new user, and they'll custody it for you. You can also connect it to LN Bits if you want to do that as well. And it also allows you to have a Nostr. It can hold your Nostr private key. So, one of the things that's important is that if you're going to use Nostr, you should probably not put your private key into somebody's random website. So the good thing is, like, GetAlby allows you to sign for permission to use other experimental Nostr websites, or for you to log into other, effectively, like, log in to various Nostr clients. Yeah. So if, like, one Nostr client isn't your taste, if you don't like it, you can try another one. But then you don't have to sacrifice your key security.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. I think I like that idea of like you're saying, like, LN Bits and doing the split payments. And obviously you mentioned, like, ordinals. I think probably moving forward we are going to see a lot of a lot more stuff like this, because there is definitely a need for it. There is a thirst for it. Like different use cases, new use cases, experimentation, and I think like one of the things that Ethereum has with DAOs is something that's like it's always interesting to see how these DAOs are structuring the governance, and whether they succeed or whether they fail, what the good DAOs are and what the bad DAOs are. But the point is that I think it sounds like with these like LN bits and doing split payments and things, like we're in some ways getting closer to maybe seeing something like DAOs on Bitcoin, even if they're not like on chain in the same way as like smart contracts on Ethereum. But if they're done in this way, using like split payments or like multi-sig accounts and like this LM bits kind of stuff, adding plugins in different way, and or even Nostr, like even using some other kind of protocol or network to create like the foundation or the infrastructure for the thing that makes up the DAO, but it uses Bitcoin as the main currency, the way to transact. I think that might be cool to see if we get some kind of like DAO like things on Bitcoin in the future. I've also heard of M-ordinals. I don't know if you heard of M-ordinals. I heard about this the other day. So it's like ordinals on Monero. That seems kind of. I mean, I've not sort of like you. I've not really looked into ordinals that much. It didn't. I mean, as you say, there's a lot going on, so I haven't really had the chance to check them out yet. But I've seen a little bit about them. But I guess it's not necessarily my thing. Maybe it didn't really like stir up. I mean, it's obviously an interesting idea, because it's a new thing on Bitcoin, right? It's got people excited about Bitcoin again, or
Right.
innovation on Bitcoin. But personally, it's not something I was like rushing to learn about.
Yeah, like I have like mixed feelings about DAOs, to be honest with you. Like, I think people can self-organize on their own without needing like a DAO structure. That's just my opinion. And like I sort of come from this perspective of like small business, entrepreneurship, international business, where you know, I think people can self-organize in a way that suits what their needs are. And if we're heading towards more of a decentralized world, like, and the thing of DAOs is it could work for something that's international, where everyone's remote, but it depends on how the structure of the organization is. And sometimes you don't need it. And the reason why I say that is because, like, if you look at the way Nostr was developed, they didn't need a DAO. They just like went and did it, and they just self-organized. And I think that we're sort of at the edge of where Lightning is going to mature to a point where it really is going to become used in a corporate setting or like a company setting, or, whatever kind of organizational setting you would need, because people are already talking about creating general ledgers on Lightning. And to me, that's a signal. It's like when we start talking about general ledgers, you're talking about businesses. And maybe this is a local business, like a local first business in a developing country like El Salvador, South Africa, or Guatemala, or Vietnam, or someplace where banking is incredibly difficult to get access to. But there's a tremendous amount of wealth generated in local goods and services. So, the potential to organize around that is tremendous. And that's where I think like the microeconomies will grow very rapidly in the next decade if they have access to banking. Like I worked in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, like East Africa, a long time ago. And everything that I learned there is that what a lot of academics write about these economies is really wrong. It's just my opinion. Like, people there work very, very hard. They produce a lot of stuff. They produce some very interesting goods and services. But the problem that's always been the big barrier is they don't have access to financing and they don't have access to banking. And so that stifles the growth of anything, even locally. I mean, forget about international markets, but like even locally, it's really rough because everything's based on cash, and very often you're looking at a cash economy which has fiat that just depreciates overnight, you know, and they don't have any control over that. So it's I think the potential for them to organize there is very great, and I think that, you know, it starts with like a self-organizing collective or a small business is where like the first major adoptions are, which is why if you look at the way LM-Bits is built, I mean, it's really all towards like really small businesses, you know? And it's the same thing with Square. Like Jack Dorsey is a huge proponent of Lightning and Bitcoin. And if you look at Square and their customer base, they're really after the small entrepreneur, you know, the side gig, the thing where someone might be offering you some online service or some consulting service or maybe some small business. That's what their goal, their target market is. And I can understand the connection and Jack Dorsey's obsession with Africa because that's one of the largest untapped markets with one of the largest potentials for growth in the next decade. So like how people organize and how people choose to organize, I think that's freeform, less so than a DAO. I mean, if you want to do a DAO, that's cool. I mean, that's your choice, but I think it's more of a people can organize in the way they think that's best fit for what their use case is.
Okay, that's interesting. I guess I've never really heard anyone make that kind of critique. So I think if I heard you correctly, you kind of saying that like you think or you just prefer personally the local organization. You think that's where it's at rather than this kind of like meta level digital internet, like worldwide global thing. It's more like little pockets. You think that's the way to go, really?
I think the little pockets is where you're going to see the most rapid growth. I mean, it's, you know, not saying that the other one's not going to exist, but I think that just my experience of, you know, working before in microfinance to see how people organize and human behavior, and also like experiencing physical decentralizations organizations, like for example, Burning Man. You know, Burning Man was one of the earliest ones where we're talking about real decentralization architecture and how they would organize. Like some of them were more centralized, some of them were more decentralized in how they would organize their camps. But they were all very unique, and some of them just didn't need an actual structure to organize around. They just decided, we're going to get together in chat room, we're just going to do this. Like even conferences, for example, people just get together and say, we're just going to do this. And then somebody says, okay, well then how are we going to, you know, organize, let's say the payment stuff. And then somebody makes a decision, and usually starts with the few people, and then everyone else comes along. And then later on, as it matures, it becomes more and more decentralized. But they're all different structures. I don't ever see like one homogeneous like structure.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. Just thinking about kind of like the culture, or that at least it made me think about the culture of Bitcoiners. I'm wondering if that's like a view that other Bitcoiners or the Bitcoin community shares, or at least if it's like a predominant view. Like if you asked a bunch of Bitcoiners, you know, do you prefer like kind of like local, more organic, decentralized organizations, or the you know, like the IRL or DAOs? I wonder if, I mean, I would imagine obviously Bitcoiners wouldn't favor the DAOs anyway, but yeah, I was just wondering if that's something to do with the culture. I wonder if there's like more of a local nature to the Bitcoin ethos or the Bitcoin community. I guess I'm
I
wondering.
don't
So
know.
would you class?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, okay. So do you think, would you class yourself as a Bitcoin maxi, and if you do, what do you think about the kind of criticisms of that, or like, yeah, what do you think about Bitcoin maxis?
Wait, to go back to the whole DAO thing, I honestly don't know if that's the case for
Yeah.
everyone's experience. I'm just speaking my personal experience of what I've observed of how people behave. And I mean, looking at how even meetups are organized, there's always like a few people who are just lead organizers and they have their own style of doing it. So, like there are some things which are like decentralized organizations, but I think the part where a lot of them fail is where they start having votes. And like vote manipulation is one of those things I think that's prevalent and very difficult to get around. So that's I let's put it this way. I am a little bit of a DAO skeptic. That's just me. I'm sure other people are very gung ho about it, but I have struggled to see one that really works very, very well with an actual, like when you say DAO structure, that they've actually created a DAO structure. Because even like in development, people just get together and say, we'll just do this ad hoc if it's a decentralized organization. And then later it gets more structured in some way. But that's just, I mean, I could be wrong. I could be 100% wrong, but it's just my observation from what I've seen. And then to answer your question about Bitcoin maximalism, uh, I mean, like, I like Bitcoin. I don't think I'm going to say that's the only thing that's out there because we all know it's not the only thing out there. But I think it has the best chance of winning, I mean, your largest market, really. And there's, I think there's benefit in other experimentation that's been going on, you know? If we didn't have things like NFTs on Ethereum, I'm sure, there's got to be something beneficial for that experimentation, and it may have influenced ordinals in some way. We know or we don't know. I don't know because I really am not in it. But surely having innovation on other platforms is a good thing for the entire space, because there are things that we can learn from it that are good, things that worked out, things that didn't work out. But I think that Bitcoin has the biggest chance of making it because it is like the network effect is there. And the network effect is really important because like if you look at social media and why did Facebook become one of the biggest ones? Why not MySpace or why not Friendster? Why not all these other things, right? There's that network effect. And why is it Twitter and not something else? So for adoption, I think like
Yeah, no, absolutely.
yeah. Yeah. I mean that's the whole thing. It's like I think this is the one that's gonna win, basically.
Yeah, I mean there is something to that. I've heard a lot of the arguments like that like it's worth, it's more worthwhile to spend your time betting on the one that's going to win rather than wasting your time on the ones that are less likely to win. Like if you're really trying to change things, why would you not go with, Bitcoin essentially, because that's the one that's going to make it. And so it's, like you could look at it that way. Like it's kind of like you're going to make the most impact that way. And so I guess that kind of makes sense. And I think, yeah, I've also heard people, make the arguments that like there is going to be experimentation, there is going to be other stuff, but like Bitcoin's going to be the base layer. Like it's going to be everything else comes after that. It's almost like Bitcoin is like the gold to the digital economy, essentially. Bitcoin's cyber gold, and then everything else is like layered, on top of that. And I could see that. That makes a lot of sense to me. So I guess we're coming up towards the hour mark now. I guess I just wanted to ask you if there's anything that you wanted to promote, anything you want to talk about, anything, just anything we've not covered that really interests you, or anything you think the viewers might want to know about, if you want to educate them on something. I'm happy to give you the floor.
Okay. Yeah. So actually, I do have a question for you. Are you a technical person? Or I didn't even ask that earlier. Are you a developer too, or no?
No, I'm not a developer. I have some experience with programming. I'm mostly self-taught. I did go to college and university for computing. Um, but no, I wouldn't say I'm a developer. Like I understand like, if statements, I get
Okay.
I understand like the basic concepts of programming. But
Yeah.
I'm like so rusty because it's been so long. I would say if anything, I'm a web dev. If anything, like the thing that I've done the most recently, or that I'm like most up to date on, because as I'm sure you know, like programming's it is a language, or like there are programming languages, and just like a normal language, a spoken language, if you don't use it, you lose it. And so yeah,
Yeah.
I did do some C sharp and some C plus in college and university, but I never really carried it on. And like I say, I picked it up again, but went back into like web development. Um, and so yeah. To answer your question, no, I'm not a dev, but I would say I'm definitely a technical person.
Oh, okay. Oh, cool. All right. As for like about me, if people are interested in reaching out, I am always looking for people to collaborate with. I have a GitHub, so you can find me on GitHub at Bitkarrot. You can also find me on Twitter and Nostr at Bitkarrot, iris.to.bitkarrot. I spend most of my time because I consider myself like a 10% dev. I do this on the side for fun and just because I really love it. I do little projects here and there with LM and also PlebNet Playground, and a lot of experiments in Lightning. I also write a bunch of like API libraries to help people. And on occasion, a small project that we started a long time ago called the Lyce project for Bitcoin Hong Kong, which is really, like the small version of the digital version, the digital version of like red envelopes that people give out at Chinese New Year. So instead of cash, it's like a lightning gift. So that's basically a little bit where, you can like find me if people are interested. Always looking for collaborators and certainly people who want to help maintain some of these libraries because it's getting a little bit much.
Okay, you heard it, guys. Collaborate with Bitkarrot, help her out. Um, that was brilliant. We'll put all the links. We'll put all the links in the description, so that people can contact you if they want to help you out. I'm sure there's going to be someone. Um, and yeah, thanks for coming. This has been a really cool conversation, and I appreciate your time. And yeah, I guess we'll see you guys in the next episode. So peace.
Great. Thank you so much for your time, Eves.